The people that we've been taking in from Pakistan, of, in my mind, and I think in the large proportion of city-dwelling, university-educated Pakistanis, would be regarded as barbarian. In Pakistan, they would be regarded as barbarian.
Ben Habib, welcome to Lauren the Insider. Thank you so much for joining me.
Not at all. Thank you, Lauren, for having me on. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I think our chat today will be different to normal interviews you do, because my channel is full of normal people and honest, hardworking people. And I am putting questions to you that the people want to ask, because we see politicians consistently evade what we, the people, want to know. And so I want to kick it off and ask you, we hear time and time again, people refer to the deep state. And I believe that you are an enemy of the state. What, in very basic terms, is the deep state? Who is it and how does it operate?
So the deep state is not, I think, a construct. In my mind, I don't think it's a construct that is under the control of, Blofeld with a slick cat on his lap, and he's sort of stroking his cat while he controls Western civilization. The deep state, I think, has come about perhaps initially through good intentions of various the great countries of this world. And I think it has its roots in a post-World War II environment where these great countries had just had the sort of biggest shock of their lives with 6 years of, 55 million people dead, massive economic destruction to businesses' lives and so on. And there was a desire for cooperation between these belligerent states, which I think was born out of previously belligerent states, that was born out of a desire for peace and goodness and prosperity for all mankind. But when you start championing the promotion of all mankind, and you're actually Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or President of the United States of America, actually what you're beginning to do is promote the interests of people who are not your citizenry. And I think there is something to be said for global prosperity and peace in the interests of your own country. But it's something that is finely balanced, and you've got to keep focus on your own country, because if you pursue the global good too much, you end up doing damage to your own country. And I think what happened through the institutions of the UN, the European Union, which had its roots back in a post-World War, Europe, the European Convention of Human Rights in its court, the WHO, the World Bank, the IMF, all these institutions which were born out of a post-World War II world have increasingly become self-determining organisms. And they've wanted to concentrate power in themselves, and they've taken steps to do that. And in the pursuit of that power, in empowering themselves and giving power to those institutions by the great countries of the world, what we've ended up doing is effectively hijacking the interests of those countries. And we've done deep damage to our democracies, so that we can't, as people anymore, make a decision to sack our government and expect the next government to be able to change direction of travel, so that the country can then head in a new direction, which we, the people, want of it, because we, the people, believe that to be the right way for the country now to be governed. We can't do it because we're hijacked by this international order, the global elite, if you like. And you can regard them effectively as the deep state, because they've come to control member states of their various organizations collectively. And the best example, of course, was the European Union, for which, by the way, Lauren, we haven't left yet. We might think we've left the EU, but we haven't. Northern Ireland's been left behind, and even Great Britain is absolutely hitched at the hip with the EU. So when the British people voted to leave the EU, you could say they voted to leave the EU, or you could say that they voted to leave this global order, which you could interpret as a vote against the deep state. The British people knew that they needed governance for their own benefit, and they weren't getting it in the way that it was taking place. So that's one aspect of the deep state, this global order that has gripped what were once great nation states, Western civilization. The other aspect of it is politicians who have seen the prosperity of the globe as being more important and have frankly seen the interests of their own people and the democratic mandate that they get from their people. They've seen that as troublesome because the people might interfere in their grand plan for how global prosperity is going to be delivered. And so they've set up lots of quangos, domestic bureaucracies, regulatory bodies, which make it difficult for us to change, again, direction of travel domestically. And so the lanyard class have become part of what you might call the deep state. And collectively, these forces have defeated our ability as the people in this country to direct our politicians to do what's right for us. And that is the deep state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, when we talk about the deep state, the Fabian Society are integral to that also, because for anyone that's not aware, the Fabian Society are a left-wing think tank, but they are actually so much more than that, aren't they, Ben? Because since Tony Blair, they have been doing the kind of drop, drop, drop effect, because you don't get to the position we're in at the moment by accident. This is a planned attack against patriots, I would argue.
So Tony Blair, he perpetrated a constitutional revolution in this country. And sadly, I was 32 at the time, 33 years old, roughly, when he started putting in place this revolution. But I wasn't aware of what he'd done until really relatively quite recently. It's only in the last 6 or 7 years that I've really woken up to the very dramatic changes Tony Blair made. And of course, this tilt towards globalism, this tilt towards the lanyard class, it's almost a Marxist form of governance, because what we, the British people, want and what is natural to a democracy is capitalism. It's the interests of the private individual being able to being expressed through freedom of speech, but also making money, being incentivized to make money and being allowed to keep that money yourself. And the form of governance we've had is opposite to that. Aspiration's been removed and dependency has been created. These are very sort of heading towards communist way of thinking. The idea that the state can do everything, the state can resolve everyone's problems. If we need growth in the Northeast, the state will do it by spending more money in the Northeast. This is antithetical to capitalism and Western democracy the way it used to be. The way we get people to do things in a capitalist democratic society is to give them the incentive and the ability to do it and then let them get on with it. And so you're absolutely right. I don't like the notion of left and right, because I think it hides the interference of the global order and who are deeply illiberal. But effectively, this is a fight, in my mind, Lauren. It's a fight between those of us who believe in democracy, true liberty, freedom of speech, our nation states on the one side, and those people who stand against the nation state, freedom of speech, capitalism, democracy, which effectively is what you might call extreme far left. And it is the extreme far left that have got control of the dialogue, of the narrative. And the center of gravity of acceptable political discourse has been yanked from where it used to be in the 1980s to this extreme far left position, so that anyone with a degree of common sense even nowadays is regarded as sort of, very far right. So, I mean, I completely agree with you that there's a kind of communist agenda going on. And if you destroy nation states, you destroy democracies, which eventually, this is where the EU would have taken Europe. You end up with everyone being from nowhere and no one having any allegiance to their past, to their nation state, or any culture that might pervade. Any culture to which they might, sorry, let me just start again. Any culture, any settled culture of the people, that is all set aside. And the end result of all of that is communism. So you're absolutely right in your analysis. And we've got to fight it. It's actually a fight, Lauren, between good and evil. I think that's where it's come down to. And people like Starmer, Shabana Mahmood, Stephen Reed, these people are anti-British. They believe in the global order. They believe in the end of nation states. They believe in borders coming down. And they are therefore part of this tilt towards the creation of this communist blob.
I would say as well, the way that, and I'm no politician, I'm interested in politics since I felt I had no choice but to be since becoming a mother, because I genuinely have sleepless nights, Ben, about what is happening to this country. But looking at the way Starmer operates and the way that good people like my mum, who have paid into the system their entire time, my mum has newly found herself as a widow, and now she's worried about the heating bill, and she doesn't want to be funding unvetted migrants. And she is gaslit and she is bullied by the very system that is there to allegedly protect us. And the way that Starmer operates, it's chillingly close to how the Nazis behaved.
Well, I mean, look at what we're doing. If Starmer had his way, people who are economically non-contributory, which is, most people who've retired, are going to be assisted on their way out of this existence. It's absolutely horrendous that our parliament is considering the voluntary putting to death without any judicial process of the vulnerable and the elderly, because that is what we're doing. We abolished capital punishment in 1965 because we took the view, in my mind correctly, that mankind doesn't have the right to deprive another man of their life. It was a very civilized and far-thinking and essentially Christian approach to the way the country should be governed. Wind the clock on now from 1965 to 2025, 60 years on, and it's not even for a crime that people will be put down. They'll be put down because effectively they're not economic contributors. And anyone making the case for the assisted dying bill will say, Ben, you're wrong. There's ignominy in their illnesses. They want to be relieved of their mortal coil. They want to move on. This is humane. This is just. That is an absolutely absurd and naive position for anyone to take, because once they have the power to put people to death without a judicial process. Remember when the assisted dying bill first came forward, there was going to be a court order required. That's gone. You just need 2 doctors, I think, to sign you off now and be on your merry way. Once that system is in place, it will be abused. It will morph. It will change into something where the younger generation will be saying to their elderly, look, mum, you're 85, you've had a good life. I can't afford to get on the housing ladder because of all these economically damaging policies. If you would just, you're not having a great life, do you want us to call the doctor and edge you on? And so your mum is absolutely right to be concerned. There are multiple battles going on, and one of them is against the vulnerable and the aged. We are turning into a barbaric society.
There's elderly people can be put under so much pressure by other people. They could be bullied, they could be being manipulated, and they could be forced into a situation like that. It is completely inhumane that this is even happening.
It's inhumane. It's totally against our culture. Totally against the way this country has evolved and where we were before these pernicious laws, these sinister laws were brought in by Tony Blair and set the country off in that direction. Totally unnatural. Just one thing I want to say about the deep state and the way the narrative is hijacked. If you go to the government website and you look up what far-right terrorism is, have you looked at it? Have you looked at the definition of far-right terrorism? So it talks about the violence being perpetrated by those with far-right ideologies in order to get their way, which is terrorism, having an ideology which you use violence to get. But it defines far right as three things: believing in white supremacy. Well, one might be able to argue that that is far right. Believing in white nationalism, whatever that is. But this is the really critical thing. It also defines as those people who believe in cultural nationalism as being far right. You can't be a nation if you don't have a culture. They are absolutely synonymous. So in other words, anyone who believes in this country, anyone who believes in a British culture, and I can define British culture very easily, notwithstanding the desire of the so-called far left to say, well, what is British culture? We don't know what it is. It's pretty damn clear what it is. It's not what they want it to be. They want to do away with our culture, which is why they've defined it as far right. They want to rubbish the debate, so that if you believe in this country, you're far right and therefore discredited. And that's also, by the way, Lauren, I'm darting around a bit, but it's all part of the same thing. That's also why freedom of speech is being attacked. Because if you're promoting extreme ideologies as they are, the only way to get the British people to wear it is if you shut the British people up. So we have to, they had to attack free speech. They had to shut it down. Non-crime hate incidents, as absurd as that sounds, and as absurd as it is to anyone with an ounce of common sense, is a prerequisite for this deep state to operate the way it's operating, because they have to have the right to knock on your door. The police have to have the right to knock on your door and tell you not to think and say not to think the thoughts you're having, and certainly not to express them.
I think a lot of people are feeling incredibly scared, Ben, because I hear from people day in, day out on my channel that are scared to take their children to the park, or grandparents that are near the migrant hotels. And this is done by design. We don't end up in a position like this overnight. Do you think we are just being, presented word salad by Shabina and Kira and everyone like that?
I mean, Shabana Mahmood's latest proposals for dealing with illegal migration won't work. I mean, they're all just a distraction. But, just going back to where I was earlier, Lauren, if you believe in a global order, you don't believe in nation states, which is where Starmer firmly is. Starmer and his ilk are firmly at that door, at that position. Mass migration is helpful for them because it does away with a settled culture. That's why they define cultural nationalism as far right. They don't want it. They don't want people. Inheritance tax. It's a tool used by governments to break our connection with the past. Part of the reason they've levied it on the farmers, they're not going to make much money out of the inheritance tax that they've levied on farmers, but it breaks our connection with our farmers' connections with the proprietarial nature, the family proprietarial nature of farming, which goes back generation on generation. And that generational sense of proprietorship, ownership of their farms, the preparedness to get up at 5 a.m. and actually, for a pittance, keep the country fed. That is something that is part of being British. And so inheritance tax serves a dual purpose. It raises a small amount of money, but it breaks the British people's connection with the past. And you can't have a connection with the past if you stand against, in order to break a sense of culture in this country, you've got to break the connection with the past. You've got to break the connection with the belief and value system that you just expressed that you have. And one really easy way to do it is with mass migration, and then tell those of us who see the real risks of mass migration that we are racist or we're xenophobic. I am not racist or xenophobic. My father is Pakistani. And I would be very suspicious of any form of immigration other than immigration that is done in very small numbers, which demonstrably benefits our economy and doesn't threaten our culture at the same time. Any other form of immigration is fundamentally wrong. Allowing people to come into this country is justified across the channel in dinghies, is justified on the basis that it would be inhumane and uncivilized not to take in these people who are coming from war-torn countries. What is actually barbaric and uncivilized is taking in undocumented single men in droves from a perfectly safe country, France, and allowing them allowing the risk and the actuality of assaulting civil society in the United Kingdom. It is uncivilized not to enforce borders because it is your citizenry that are assaulted. That is uncivilized. It is the end of civilization when you don't have borders. And they've turned the whole thing on its head. Mass migration, both legal and illegal, needs to stop. We need to revoke any of the indefinite leave to remain that's been granted since Starmer came to office, at least starting at that position. We need to stop handing out British citizenship. We need to have a voluntary repatriation program for people who are in this country legally. And we need to stop handing out visas willy-nilly to people who want to come as students to this country or to work here. And we certainly need to stop handing out visas to people who bring their families with them. All of these things need to be dramatically changed if we are to preserve any semblance of what it means to be British and to carry forward the terrific values and the terrific culture, the terrific constitution that hundreds of years of political and cultural evolution delivered to us, our generation. If we're to carry that forward, we need a dramatic change in the way this country is governed.
Liz Truss said that as well when she was interviewed by Andrew Gold. And I wasn't a fan of hers before, but I thought on that podcast, she spoke very openly. And she said the entire system, it needs to be dissolved and it needs to be gutted. Yeah. It is not fit for purpose, because we also see the universities, the judiciary, the media, it's all completely infiltrated as well. And it is pumping out dangerous left ideology, I would argue. What do you think on that one?
Completely. I mean, they're doing so. Lawmaking is upstream of culture, and all the laws made by Tony Blair stand against the nation state of the United Kingdom, and they stand against equality under the law. And I can explain that as well if you'd like me to. But when he changed all those laws, he started changing the way we think of our own culture, which is why some people find it difficult to define what it means to be British. And it's because he set in train laws which undermine it all. And those laws and regulations, which the country's institutions have to enforce because they're subject to those laws and regulations, create the environment in universities, secondary education, primary education, the armed forces, the police force, public services, the civil service, right across the board. Everyone is dancing to the tune of regulations and laws which are effectively anti-British, which stand against our ability to even understand who the hell we are. And we are going, an advanced UK government would repeal virtually every single law all the way back to Tony Blair. If we're in doubt about repealing any particular law, we would repeal it. Even if we make mistakes, we were in a much better, in repealing a law, we were in a much better position as a country in 1996 than we have ever been since. We have to get back to that position before we can countenance any real change in the way this country is governed. We've got to restore our country before we can reform it. It's one of my issues with Farage's Reform Party. They want to do more untested reformation. And that's like putting plaster on a gaping wound. The wound needs to be allowed to heal. And the only way to heal the wounds in this country is to restore it back to where it was before we then start tinkering with it again. The other great thing about the way this country evolved until Tony Blair was that we never did anything dramatic. All reformation was incremental, slowly done so that its effects could be tested and determined before any other reformation took place. So we saw the United Kingdom actually as a rather dull country, one that never did anything dramatic. That was a good thing. You don't want countries doing dramatic things. Now, Lauren, you and everyone would testify, we've had dramatic political turmoil, constitutional turmoil since 2016, because we haven't adhered to the way that we used to slowly evolve. We have had seismic changes taking place, and our political class effectively stands against the wishes of the people. This is an untenable position. Liz Truss was absolutely right. We need dramatic change, but that change has to involve taking us back to a restored country, a settled country, one that we understood and had proven to work, the constitution of the country as it was in 1996.
When we talk about this, the state our country is in, it's impossible to have that conversation without talking about the grooming gangs and the predominantly Pakistani grooming gangs. Now, as a man that was born in Pakistan, can you shed any light on why, in your opinion, are they predominantly Pakistani? I've spoken to lots of survivors and victims. I've spoken to lots of police off the record. I have a wide range of things that I believe it's from, but I wondered what your insight and opinion is on this.
So Pakistan, like any developing country, is a country with lots of different social classes. You know, it's only the developed countries that have very large middle classes, and it's a preserve of a civilized country to have a very large middle class, because it's the very significant size of the middle class that carries forward, working and middle class, that carries forward the culture of a country. Pakistan doesn't have that privilege. It's a country with many different strata, and a very large underclass, if you like, uneducated people who haven't had any real brush with civilized society, frankly. And the people that we've been taking in from Pakistan, in my mind, and I think in the large proportion of city-dwelling, university-educated Pakistanis, would be regarded as barbarian. In Pakistan, they would be regarded as barbarian. Yet, because we have elevated all human rights to an equal level, we are unable to distinguish. We have prohibited ourselves from distinguishing civilized Pakistanis from uncivilized Pakistanis. And we have opened the floodgates to uncivilized Pakistanis. Before you started recording, we discussed the airport is it? I can't remember his name. Tahir Ali, I think.
Oh, in Maipur, you were saying.
Yeah, in Mirpur, which is in Kashmir, and that is a part of Pakistan. Very few Pakistanis would have been to Mirpur. It's a backward part of Pakistan. Yet you have a Labour Party MP saying we need an airport there. That's because we have lots of people from Mirpur coming to this country. We should not have lots of people from Mirpur coming to this country. We shouldn't have it. So we've taken on, frankly, we've taken barbarians into this country. And then this progressive discrimination, this fear of being called racist, has hijacked not just our criminal justice system, which it has, but it's hijacked all the services around our criminal justice system, social services, local communities, the NHS, people who are in charge of the care of these white young girls who were abused. They too were hijacked by this fear that they might be called racist, and this desire to be seen to be progressive and discriminate in favor of ethnic minorities. And so, having taken in a whole load of barbarians into the country, we then put a protective blanket around them, from our criminal justice system all the way through to the various services I've just mentioned. And I think some of the people who were charged with the responsibility of caring for these young girls, who often come from broken homes themselves and in foster care, etc., some of them were preying on these young girls themselves, and no one was prepared to call it out. And the other impact of the Human Rights Act is that once a crime has been committed, it's not the victim that is protected, because the victim has already suffered. The Human Rights Act then serves to protect the criminal. And so we have this crazy situation where foreigners in this country have committed a sexual crime against their own children. There's one example, at least one example, of a man who I think raped his daughter and was not was not deported back to his home country because it would have denied him a right to family life. So he was kept in this country with his family, with the same daughter that he had been found guilty of abusing. His human rights were promoted over and above and to the detriment of his own family. That's how hijacked our system is. And it would be false to say that in Pakistan, pedophilia is accepted. It's not accepted. Until 2018, it was punishable by death. In fact, I was in touch. I wanted to get to the bottom of this from a Pakistani perspective. So I spoke to a very senior law enforcement officer in Pakistan. And he told me that since 2018, I've now read it and looked it up, etc. Since 2018, as it happens, we in this country, in the United Kingdom, have a treaty with Pakistan called the Prisoner Transfer Treaty, Pakistan Prisoner Transfer Treaty. And under that treaty, the British government has the right, still has the right to deport Pakistani nationals, they can be dual nationals or nationals, to Pakistan if they've committed a crime in the United Kingdom and have been found guilty. They can serve out their time in Pakistan. We have the right to deport them. Not once has that treaty been invoked because of the European Convention of Human Rights protecting these people's position. They have to give consent to go back to Pakistan. And of course, they won't give consent because the punishment they would get in Pakistan would be much more severe than what we give them here. So we've taken barbarians into our country. We've put a protected blanket around them, and we can't even get rid of them where we have the ability technically to do so because of our own stupid human rights law. I want to say one more thing, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
The European Convention of Human Rights, which is the heart of our Human Rights Act, the human rights law that we practice in this country, used to be just used in the United Kingdom. But we saw it being used for the first time to bring in those 24,000 Afghanis from Pakistan. They weren't in Afghanistan, they were in Pakistan because there had been a data breach and there was a suggestion that the Taliban might target these people now that they know their identities. And it was under the Human Rights Act, the European Convention of Human Rights, that we sought to protect a body of people who weren't even in the country. So we reached into Pakistan and we brought these Afghanis, some of whom had already been refused asylum in the United Kingdom. We brought them into England, into the United Kingdom. And because of the European Convention of Human Rights arguing that families mustn't be split, that everyone has a right to family life, etc., we said to these people, you can bring your families with them. But families is not a defined term in law. So what is meant by family to one of these Afghanis is nothing remotely close to what we think of as a family. So in one case, I'm sure you're familiar with this, Lauren, someone brought in 20 family members with them.
Yeah.
These 24,000 people that were given sanctuary in the United Kingdom, coming from Pakistan where they already had sanctuary, brought with them another 77,000 people. About 100,000 people came across as a result of that act of self-harm done by the British government. And if that isn't bad enough, the cost of bringing them to the United Kingdom and housing them and looking after them as we do in our ridiculously generous way is £7 billion. And then they talk about our inability to make ends meet. We're burning money.
And then we've got children going to breakfast clubs, and we've got parents working multiple jobs, and we've got nurses that are exhausted. You know, it's a kick in the face to patriots that this is happening. I wanted to bring up Elon Musk. Elon Musk has put his support behind Advance. Is he funding Advance? Is his commitment right? Elon, we need your money.
I mean, I would, if Elon were to offer, of course, I'd be delighted. I know that he shares very closely our fear of the threats to Western civilization by the practice of the kind of, deep state and governance systems that we're practicing. He shares that fear. And he's a friend of the United Kingdom. And I think he does recognize that Advance UK has the elements required to save this country. And if he's listening to this interview, I would be very grateful for all assistance. He has endorsed us, as you know, publicly. But he's probably waiting to see what effect we can have on the political landscape before coming in, full square behind us. We need all the support we can get, Lauren. Of course, it has to be done legally. It needs to come through the right channels, etc. But he does have British businesses. So, yeah.
I think as well, there's a conversation where people feel awkward within the right circle because the right feels very divided. But I think a lot of people are also not aware of how reform are actually very much establishment. So I just wanted to give viewers a little recap on this. Ben, yourself, Tommy Robinson and Rupert Lowe are all censored from GB News. Tommy has never been on GB News, but as people saw from a recent clip, they still want to cover his court case because they understand that there is a lot of support for him. The reason that you have been completely ostracized from The Spectator and GB News is because Sir Paul Marshall, who owns these media outlets, is a major donor to reform. And so what we see the news become increasingly manipulated, distorted, and propaganda being pumped out by the likes of GB News, in my opinion, and The Spectator. And then we look to the other media conglomerate owner, and it's Rupert Murdoch, who failed to deny that he had done a deal with Labour to drop Leveson Part 2, which was an investigation post-phone hacking looking into police corruption and the media. So you've got no support from mainstream media who are trying to attack you and censor you and discredit you. But these are the very people that are, I would say, GB News to me are as bad as Sky, because they're all doing the same thing. It's just packaged up differently with different motives. What are your thoughts on how you have been completely ostracized?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that it's because I launched Advance UK that I was cancelled from GB News. I used to be on it 2 or 3 times a week. And I launched Advance UK on the 30th of June. Martin Daubney, who's a friend of mine and a presenter on GB News, had me on that day to talk about it. And that was the last time I was on, 30th of June. And the rumor I hear is that the publicly they deny that I've been cancelled, but the rumor I hear from people saying, well, they've spoken to people in GB News, the reason I've been cancelled is because I was attacking Farage too much. But you've got to remember that Farage is reform and reform is Farage. It's virtually impossible to challenge reform without personally challenging Farage. He is reform. And I mean, it's a bit cheeky also, frankly, to claim that I attacked him personally. When he was asked about me, he said it was a champagne popping moment when I left his party. He said he'd rather eat nails than have me back in the party. He said that I was an insignificant man with a view of himself that's way beyond my station. I mean, these are all ad hominem attacks. To the extent that I have challenged Farage, I have challenged him on the way he has structured reform, which is totally in his and Zia Yusuf's control, the policies which he's got, which are at 6s and 7s with each other, his recruitment of Tory after Tory after failed Tory after failed Tory, which attests your point that actually he doesn't offer anything new. He's just the Conservative Party Mark II, which is effectively the uniparty. Farage, and I'm going to attack him now, but Reform or Farage are in the pursuit of power. They're not in the pursuit of saving this country. They are going to do and say whatever is required in order to get into power. The argument that they will make is that, Ben, you're naive by actually saying things that you believe in and being a conviction politician, because you have to play the game. And if you don't play the game, you won't get into power and you won't be able to save the country anyway. But my argument in response, and I believe this obviously to be 100% the case, the British people are where you and I are, Lauren. They voted to leave the EU because they could see the damage that this global order was doing to us, this deep state, if you like. That's what they voted for. They can see the damage being done by mass migration. The people are with us, number one. Number two, it's political expediency and the preparedness to lie to the British people that has got us into this position in the first place. And it's about bloody time that politicians actually spoke about what they believed in, rather than just currying favor with the British people as a means to get into power. And lastly, there is no way Farage can argue that he's going to deliver the country to safety, even though he's lying about it now. If he's lying about it now, he's going to lie even more when he gets into office. And we see that, as I've already mentioned, by the recruitment of failed Tory after failed Tory. He was on Capitol Hill. He was on Capitol Hill 2 days before what I'm about to disclose. He was on Capitol Hill talking about the impact on freedom of speech from the Online Safety Act. Do you remember? He went to Capitol Hill and he said, our freedom of speech is being undermined by the Online Safety Act. 2 days later, at the Reform Conference, he revealed Nadine Dorries as a member of Reform UK. Nadine Dorries was the architect, when she was in the Conservative Party, of the Online Safety Act. He's at sixes and sevens with himself. He doesn't know whether he's coming or going, but politically, philosophically. He just wants power. He's a man that cannot be trusted. Reform cannot be trusted. That's why I set up Advance. And the fact that GB News is circling the wagons around him, and Talk TV's done the same. And it's not just me that's been cancelled from GB News and Talk. It's anyone associated with Advance. Yeah. Anyone. So for them to say it's because I'm attacking Farage, well, Howard Cox has had a few things to say about Farage, but he's been cancelled. Sarah White, who was, that very brave protester who joined Advance, she was on GB News. Patrick Christie, who's a great guy, had her on. She disclosed she was part of Advance. That was the last time she was on GB News. There's a pattern here. They don't want Advance. They want their man. GB News and Talk want their man, and their man is Nigel Farage. And I'll disclose something else to you, which people aren't aware of. I received a series of texts, abusive texts, from a senior member of Reform, who is also a presenter. I won't mention their name, saying that they would do everything in their power on the public stage to discredit us and prevent us from going forward. That is a senior member of Reform who is a presenter on one of these channels. The wagons are circled around them, but I don't care. I really don't care. We got to 37,500 members without mainstream media. We will go directly to the people. We'll do it through podcasts like this. We'll do it through events across the country. Advance has just launched its own channel. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes,
Lauren,
you've got a new podcast channel. And I think that's incredibly clever, because the mainstream media, we know, work in cahoots closely with the government. And I can vouch for that, having come from mainstream media. And you are becoming a voice for the people. And this is why I believe there's so much division in this country. It's because the good patriots are not being listened to. And
the people aren't being listened to. The people are basically patriotic, and the people are not being listened to.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful. And we also see the mainstream media and the deep state attack Tommy Robinson time and time again. And I've been very vocal in saying that I believe patriots feel that when you attack Tommy, you attack us, because we are Tommy. We are all people who are unequivocally committed to protecting children, to protecting our values. And the fact that people are more angry on the left that Tommy Robinson's legal bill was paid for by Elon Musk over the fact that up to 1 million white, predominantly white, children have been groomed, raped, and failed shows you how toxic society is at the moment.
Completely. Shabana Mahmood, after the 13th September rally, which was entirely peaceful, there were 26 arrests. 17 of which I believe were the Antifa lot, the counter protesters, up the road. Shabana Mahmood, after that rally, described it as far right, led by a former member of the BNP. And what they're not, which is, again, just testifies the point that the politicians are in opposition to the people. There were, I don't know, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people present. And at one point on X, because I was watching it when I was in the green room behind the stage, 2.5 million people watching online. Now, Tommy Robinson is no saint. He'll admit that. He's done stuff in the past of which I'm sure he's not proud. But he is a British working class, remorseless fighter. And he has stood up for the working class in this country, and he's stood up and he's called things out way ahead of people like way ahead of people like Farage, who simply, even now, Farage won't really talk about the grooming gangs. He doesn't really want to talk about it because it's all a bit dirty. It's all a bit mucky. He doesn't want to get into that bit of politics. Whereas it's the working class lads like Tommy Robinson, like Liam Tufts, who've had the courage to come up and speak about it before others would. And instead of looking at that rally and saying to themselves, in Shabana Mahmood's case, that at least 3.5, 4 million people were involved in that rally.
Yeah.
That is a massive, massive democratic mandate for what that rally represented. It has the democratic mandate. And instead of calling it far right, what the government should have been doing was saying, we're going to listen to the British people. They should have done this after the Southport killings. And there wouldn't have been Southport protests or violence if the government had come out and called Axel Rudikabana out for what he was, identified him, made it clear that he was in possession of ricin, Al-Qaeda workbooks, etc. Instead, they tried to deflect the British people by calling him a Welshman, trying to give us an image of someone standing out in the farm.
Boy.
Yeah, Welsh choir boy. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And one thing I wanted to say in my speech on the 13th of September, but I forgot because I was speaking without notes. But one thing I want to say is, we started off, when I was a child, Parliament had no protection around it. Parliament was open to the public. The buildings were open to the public. From the 1980s onwards, the security around Parliament has increased and increased and increased. And I was horrified. I don't know when you were last near Parliament, but they now have a 9-foot tall metal fence right across the front of Parliament. The bollards that used to be there have gone. It's been replaced by a 9-foot tall metal fence. That, for me, symbolizes the disconnection and the fear our politicians have of the people. They're disconnected from the people. They stand in opposition to the people, and now they need protection from the people with this 9-foot tall metal fence. It should be their aim to take that fence down. They will only be able to take that fence down when they actually do what the British people want. And what I really hope, Lauren, because I want peace. I want a peaceable outcome. I really hope they do what the people want before the people decide to take matters into their own hands. The British people are not moved to violence. The British people will form a queue rather than try and get to the front of a line quickly. They will be obedient. They will be as good as they possibly can. But at some point, there is a risk if the government doesn't get a grip of things going wrong. And I hope it never happens. I hope Advance UK and other political representatives of the people can actually make sure that never happens. But the government at the moment, and I'm afraid Farage, Reform, and the Conservative Party, they are not stepping forward. And they are not stepping forward to give voice to the British people. They're still scared. They're still fearful. And they need to be braver.
And you can tell that Farage has had intense media training as well. The way that he answers certain questions, it's just, it's come from someone that's written the answer for him. And so that's the point where I just check out. And I lost my respect for him a long time ago. The question everyone wants to know, Ben, is the work you're doing with Advance is incredible. And the work that Rupert Lowe is doing with Restore is fantastic. Together, you could be dynamite. Are you going to grant my Christmas wish?
It's not in my grant.
Right.
Your Christmas wish being Rupert Lowe joining Advance.
Yes.
Advance was set up in consultation with Rupert Lowe. I wanted him to be leader. I had no desire to be a leader of a political party. I find it astounding that at the age of 60, having worked pretty hard all my life, I'm doing this. But I'm doing it because I'm compelled to do it. But I would much rather Rupert Lowe, who is an MP, had led it. And I invited Rupert to lead it. He agreed he would lead it. The constitution of the party was drafted in discussion with Rupert Lowe. But for reasons you will have to ask him, I think he was under enormous pressure when he was thrown out of Reform, when he agreed to lead Advance in concept. I think he was under a lot of pressure from the threats made against him by the police. He had a police investigation and parliamentary investigations and whatnot that Farage had started against him, Azir Yusuf had started against him. And I think that may have been hugely wearing on him. So when he consented to being leader of Advance and to work on the party with me, I think he may not have perhaps been fully in touch with where he was. But once he'd got rid of those police complaints and bullying charges, etc., he pretty much quickly decided he didn't want to be part of a new political party and he wanted a movement. And I completely disagree with him. I see no benefit in a movement. A cross-party movement, bringing together members of parties that have already failed, isn't going to redeem the country. We need redemption through a new political force, not through a movement which brings together the failed politicians of the past. Rupert's doing a great job. He's shining a bright light on some serious issues. He's making every MP in Parliament squirm on their seats as he socks it to them.
Yeah.
But what he should do is get into a political party. And if he really wants to be able to do some dramatic change in the country, because it's through the ballot box, it's only really through the ballot box that change can happen. If he wants to join the Conservative Party, I think he is making a mistake, because it's possible, this is a question you have to put to Rupert, but it's possible that he thinks that under a generic-led Conservative Party, he could join the Conservative Party, they could become the Conservative Party of old, and they could save the country. The Conservative Party has, in my entire life, only ever been conservative under Margaret Thatcher. It's actually been pretty bloody useless at every other opportunity it's had. And at the moment, it's still, they describe themselves as a broad church, which for me means that they're a church of no beliefs, or they're a divided church. And Kemi Badenoch is trying very hard to ride this divided house. She's trying to hold the sort of Liberal Democrats in the Conservative Party in the party, at the same time as trying to hold people like Katie Lamb, Suella Braverman, etc. in the party. It's an impossible job running the Conservative Party, because it's a party that has lost direction. So Rupert, if you want to get into politics and really make a difference, you're in politics, sorry, forgive me, but if you want to really make a difference to the way politics is done in this country, you've got to get into a political party. I don't think it's the Conservative Party. It's certainly not Reform. So by a process of elimination,
Lastly, Katie Hopkins is loved by patriots. She's incredibly smart, and I believe she understands, but she cares deeply about patriots and good, hardworking people. Would you start discussions with her to bring her into Advance?
I love Katie. She's super brain. I mean, she's witty as hell. I watch her batshit bonkers Britain little skits. Whenever I want to just alleviate the stress of our situation, I watch her, and amongst others, but she alleviates it. But I've had the great pleasure of speaking to her one-on-one for about an hour and a half, exchanging political views and where the country is, etc. And as you rightly say, she's super bright. Behind that witty exterior is an equally bright, intellectual, capable mind. And but it's really Katie you need to ask. Advance will have any British citizen as a member, and we welcome all patriots applying to either represent Advance or join the executive or join our college, with which I'm sure you're familiar. And Katie, of course, would be 100% welcome, as would Rupert Lowe, 100% welcome.
So the plan we need then is, let's summarize this. We just need probably quite a lot of money from Elon, but it's not a lot of money to Elon. We will then get Rupert Lowe to join and Katie Hopkins to join. And therefore, we're starting January in an amazing place, Ben, because what you are doing is huge. And the only way to get to the root cause of the destruction of what is happening in this country is to gut and drain this swamp. And so
Absolutely.
I would really urge all patriots to check out Ben and Advance.
This is Lauren the Insider reporting for Urban Scoop. It is so important that we continue going. We are 100% independent and can only continue our work of bringing you non-bias, non-corporate content with your backing. To find out more, go to urbanscoop.news/support-us and give me a cheeky follow on socials. I am on YouTube at Lauren the Insider. Thank you.